All right, guys, welcome to the Ravit Show. Very, very happy today, obviously, because I have Barr Moses as my guest on the Ravit Show. Barr Moses is the CEO and co-founder of Monte Carlo, a data reliability company backed by Excel, GGV, Redpoint, and other top Silicon Valley investors. So, obviously, a little about her previous journey. She was the VP at Customer Operations at Gainsight, a management consultant at Bain and Company, served in the Israeli Air Force as a commander of an intelligence and data analyst unit. So we'll obviously know more about Burr from her. And before we start today's discussion, obviously I wanted to let people know, whoever is joining in, that you guys have 10 chance to win, obviously, Monte Carlo swag, and that too will be choosing 10 winners. Three of them will be chosen in this show today, and the rest 7 will be announced this week. So looking forward to the discussion today. We'll be discussing about Bird's journey, about data observability, about data quality, building data teams. So don't forget to obviously ask questions around a lot of data. Okay, without any further delay, let's have Burr here. Hey Burr, welcome to the Ravit Show.
How's it going? Great to be here.
Same, yeah, fantastic. And I was just letting folks know that they have a chance to win, obviously, the new Monte Carlo swag. So if I'm not wrong, this is the new one, right?
Yeah, for sure. They'll get it shipped.
Oh, wow, fantastic. So what they only need to do is type hashtag Monte Carlo in the chat and they win. Obviously we'll be announcing 3 of them. I already see 4 entries coming in, so guys, don't forget to type hashtag Monte Carlo and have questions for Burr around data, because we'll be talking a lot around data. So obviously, Burr, I've known you like the data queen, to be honest, because you are everywhere talking about data mesh, about data observability, about data team building, and all of those things. So I'll have a lot of questions for you today. But to start with, obviously, why not introduce yourself to the audience today?
For sure. So awesome to be here. Love your show. Love your energy. So my name is Barr. I started a company called Monte Carlo a few years ago. We're focused on helping companies trust their data, which is a huge problem that I have tons of thoughts and really looking forward to diving into that. And we basically created the category of data observability. We're fortunate to work with some great companies, and I'm excited to spend more time to talk a little bit about what that means.
Yeah. Fantastic. I think this will be a journey. Obviously, I just wanted to talk about a little about your early days. How did you first get interested in data, and when was it? Because I've known people on my show that they have got into data since years, but still, how did it happen?
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of funny given also, it feels like data has been around, it's been around for like 50, 60, 70, whatnot years, right? It's been forever, but there's been such an acceleration in the recent years. So many new people entering the industry and the space. It's super exciting. So I love seeing folks kind of from different backgrounds, engineering, product, things that traditionally have not been actually data now entering data. But I digress. On my background, I was actually, I was born and raised in Israel. My dad is a physics professor, and my mom is a meditation and dance teacher. So grew up with both of those in my household. I sort of like to joke that, growing up, basically every question that I had, I would get 2 opposite answers from my parents. My mom would say something and my dad would say the exact opposite.
Exactly.
And so even from an early day, I had to actually resort to kind of data-driven decision-making. I'd be like, okay, well, what does the data tell me in that case? I sort of had to make my decisions up.
Oh my! So you actually dealing it since childhood. You are somewhere.
In some sense, yeah. I mean, I think data is all around us, right? And it's sort of it's in nature, it's in our day-to-day decisions. And now we're trying to figure out how to operationalize it, but it's been here, since forever. My background is in sort of math and statistics, and so worked with data teams in various kind of environments. And most recently was at a company called Gainsight, which created the customer success category. And at Gainsight, I had the fortune of building the data and analytics team that was responsible for our own data. So we were, eating our own dog food, if you will. And that's where I realized, how incredibly hard it was to be the person who's kind of responsible for data, trying to use data, and trying to help a company become data driven. How hard that is. Like almost, it felt like mission impossible back then.
So that's fantastic. We had an interesting comment from obviously every is here. Hi every. So Monte Carlo is such a good name, and definitely that was something in my mind too. That how did you come up with such a name, Monte Carlo?
Yeah, great question. And I mentioned sort of my background is in math and stats, and so I worked in the statistics department, with Monte Carlo simulations back in the day. And when we started the company, we actually didn't have a lot of time to come up with the name. We started working with customers pretty quickly, and we needed to come up with something. And I wanted something that had its roots in the data space. But also something that, would be sort of memorable and even fun to a certain degree, right? I really believe that, sort of magic happens when you're working on something that's inspiring and fun to you.
Yeah.
And so I actually opened my college stats book and, just like went through kind of different sort of names and titles there. And, one option, which was Markov chains, which did not sound great. Another was Bayes' theorem, which also I didn't think would sort of roll off the tongue so easily. And then I remembered Monte Carlo. And that's it. We just went with that. And, for folks who are in data, they typically sort of, know sort of its origins and where it comes from.
Exactly. Wow. Great way to, choose a name. And definitely I can only imagine the work that you have started very quickly around it, because you actually went to a book to find a name of your company, which is fantastic. So to obviously moving forward, I wanted to actually have a question for you around something around the poor data quality at different stages of the data life cycle. What do you think are the actual contributing factors to that?
Yeah, so I think in general, we mentioned this, like data has been around for a while, and honestly, the problem of bad data and data quality has also been around for a while. It's not a new problem, right? Exactly. Anyone in data sort of is familiar. I bet if I ask anyone in the audience here, to tell me about a time that they encountered sort of bad data, or when they kind of woke up in the morning and got a pager or we just got into the office and suddenly got an email from someone saying, hey, the data looks wrong, what's going on? And suddenly like your heart starts beating and you start sweating and you're like, oh my god, I don't know where this is from and I don't know what's happening, and you start just being thrown into the spin. And then you pull in other people. You pull in maybe the data engineer to try to figure out, is something broke in the pipeline. You pull in the analyst to make sure that the report was refreshed on time. Maybe you pull in the engineer more upstream, who's sort of responsible for changes to the website. There's so many different reasons for why the data that you're using could go wrong. But that problem is just common to everyone, right?
Exactly.
However, I do think it's getting a lot worse today, and we don't have the right tools and frameworks to deal with it. Yeah, and I think the reason why it's getting worse is, first of all, there's, this is kind of obvious, but there's way more data sources, right? And way more companies that rely on third-party data. So like e-commerce companies or fintech companies or media or retail, they can rely pretty in a standard way on like thousands of third-party data sources. And if one of those breaks, like go figure out which one broke and why. And, maybe they just, made the change somewhere in there and didn't let you know that. That can happen. And so the reliance on more and more data sources just makes it way harder to know when data is wrong, why. The second reason why I think this is becoming a way bigger issue is because we have increasingly complex data pipelines and data architecture. So before, we just had to make sure that whatever data we ingested was right, and then that's it, we're done, see you later. we ingested data that's accurate. Okay, I don't have to worry about it anymore. But today, your data goes through so many stops and transformations and different steps. You need to be thinking about it in a whole different way. If you're thinking about data quality only for your data warehouse, that's just the tip of the iceberg, right? But you need to think about the data quality in your data lake and in your ETL and in your BI and your machine learning model. And when you're thinking truly about data quality, it's spanning the whole thing, right?
Right. I can only, yeah. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, and then the third reason for why I think this is becoming more important is that we just have way bigger and more specialized data teams. So we have, data engineers and machine learning engineers and data analysts and product data managers, which is a totally new role, and analytics engineers and all these different people who have their hands in their data. And that's just the people who actually actively manage data. Think about all the other teams like finance and marketing and support and R&D and all these other teams who are actually using data now. So it's exponentially more people that now rely on the data.
Exactly.
And so all of these things sort of create the perfect storm for why actually data being wrong has a tremendous impact on your company. And we're seeing companies that, a small schema change, sort of an innocent schema change, can result in actually millions of dollars lost for one incident. Which is insane to think about. And then think about all the decisions, the data-driven decisions or sort of digital products that rely on data today. In fact, most of our applications actually rely on data. And so oftentimes when our applications are down, it's because of the data. Like to give you an example, in 2016, I think Netflix was down for 45 minutes because of duplicate data.
Exactly.
45 minutes. That's a really long time. I could have watched 2 episodes or something during that time.
That's so true. Oh my. So what do you think is data downtime? Is this something which is the data downtime?
Yeah, so we actually defined sort of data downtime and data observability and sort of, brought that language to help bring clarity for how sort of a new approach to addressing data quality. I think data quality and kind of, anomaly detection, all those things are very important, but they're just a point solution, right? To really address this, you need to think about this in sort of a broader context, right? And, I think the best way to think about this, or the best way to manage this, is kind of to take a page from software engineering book. Software engineering has also been around for a while, way more than data. And they figured out a couple of stuff here and there. You can say that they, there's some tips and tricks that perhaps we can adopt from them. And I think the data industry has a lot to learn from software engineering, and that we're behind potentially by even a decade or so. And so if you actually think about how software engineering manages sort of handles problem of reliability or like healthy outcomes or healthy systems, is based on observability. And observability is basically is a pretty simple concept, honestly. It's basically the concept of just saying, look at the outcomes of a system to understand its health. And that has been translated into some very powerful tools like Datadog and AppDynamics and others, which we're very familiar with. And any engineering team would be insanely crazy to run their operations without something like that.
Right.
What if we took that concept and applied that to data, right? How crazy is that? Like, are we crazy to think that we need something like that? I think I used to think that, maybe today a little less so, but you kind of have to be crazy to get, kind of the modern data stack. If you have a data lake, a data warehouse, a BI, let's just say you have like, S3, Looker, Snowflake, Databricks, right? You invest so much in kind of building a state-of-the-art architecture for your data team, but you don't know if the data itself is accurate. Someone sort of said it's kind of like having a Ferrari but keeping it in your garage, right? And so, I think the concept of data downtime, which we defined as periods of time when data is missing, inaccurate, or otherwise erroneous, helps us to define kind of the world of what data observability includes. And so we actually did a lot of work to define what data observability means. And that includes sort of at the intersection of data quality, data lineage, and data governance.
Yes, definitely. And Robert here definitely says it's a crazy field, so much information to learn. And that's so true, right? It's you've just mentioned about so many fields, but all the fields somewhere are connected to data. And data is like obviously the king here. So we have an interesting question that I would want to pick from the audience here by Anmol Sharma. How can you see through numbers or data to find out the pattern responsible for its bad quality? Like, what is that approach of yours? So I'm sure everyone has a different approach, but definitely want to hear yours.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. When I started Monte Carlo, I thought the same thing as you did. I was like, well, everyone has their different approach, right?
Exactly.
And actually, I was like, you know what? I'm going to collect some data to check if that's true. Very meta. And so I actually researched and spoke to hundreds of data teams, ranging from small startups and just data-driven organizations to larger organizations like Netflix and Facebook, who invested thousands of engineers to solve this problem. And I actually asked them, what does bad data look like to you, and how do you deal with data quality? So both of those questions I asked when data goes wrong, what does it look like? How do you know it's wrong? And some people shared, there's like a high, simple things like there's way more rows than I expected or way less rows. There's like a higher rate of null values. The sort of value of the field is like way out of whack, not what I expected. There's very many different reasons, right, that people sort of mention that. And then the second thing that I asked was, how do you actually resolve it? What are the things that you do to solve for data quality? And you know what the interesting thing was that I was shocked to learn is that actually there is a pattern. And actually there are similarities. Yes. Okay. Totally new, I know. It actually blew my mind, right? I was like, oh, actually there is a strong pattern here. And actually we can standardize an approach that is strong and that is compelling and can bring value. And so we actually defined sort of 5 pillars of data observability. And if you actually monitor and track and instrument and analyze these 5 pillars, you can get a very strong handle on the health of your data. That includes data quality, but not only. So the 5 pillars, the first is freshness. So that's everything about the timeliness of your data. Is the data arrived on time? The second is volume. So I mentioned the example with the number of rows, higher or lower than what you expect. File size. The third is schema. So the organization of the data, whether the data is added or removed. So many times bad data and data that can't be trusted is actually because of the schema change. The fourth is distribution. And this is where kind of, sort of machine learning applies pretty heavily, where you can actually look at historical value to do analysis of what you expect a certain value to be at the field level. Right. And it can be starting from pretty basic things like, null values and stuff like that, but, also very sophisticated ML driven patterns. And then the fifth pillar, which is very important, which is lineage. And lineage, both at the field level and at the table level, actually helps us to understand the meaning of this. So I would even posit to say these 4 pillars are, it's without lineage, it's very hard to actually understand whether they matter or not. So I'll give you an example. Like, let's say you have a particular table that has a freshness problem, like the data just didn't arrive. And, you look at downstream implications and no one is using that table. Like, nobody has used it since 2012. That table is just there since 2012, taking up space and not being used by anyone. Do you care if there's a freshness problem there? No, you don't. No, in fact, like, don't send that alert to me. I don't care about it, right? However, what if there's a problem in a table and there's thousands of dependencies on it, and actually your CEO or even your customer is looking at that data every day? I wouldn't want to mess with that table. I would want to know about that problem immediately, right?
Exactly.
And so that's how, we sort of bring all of these together. And I think historically, we really thought of this as like data quality or data lineage or data governance very separately. And I think those silos require people to end up like buying sort of a mishmash of different tools or trying to build different things, when actually I think that power comes from the combination of them. And from taking lineage and applying it to data quality, and taking data quality with the context that lineage and metadata and a lot of other information actually gives you. I would go to even say that like metadata by itself is actually tremendously useless. But if you apply it to the question of, can I trust my data? And where does the data come from? And does anyone care about this data? That's when it really becomes interesting. That's when you're able to actually solve real customer problems, is what I think.
Definitely, it does make sense. And there was a question actually from Dan about the data downtime. But how do you quantify bad data and data downtime that might make the business case for introducing Monte Carlo easier? Interesting.
Yeah, super interesting. How to quantify bad data and data downtime.
Yeah.
Super, like such a fantastic question. And by the way, we actually wrote a full blog post about this, so I'll post that after. I think the interesting thing is a couple of thoughts. One, here's a trick. Even if you're not quantifying how much you're paying for bad data, you are paying for it right now.
Exactly.
You already are. Whether you wanted to or you didn't want to. And you know why? Because it's part of your day-to-day. Because if you ask any data team, and the first data team that tells me our data is 100% accurate, we never have any data problems, I would be like, what is going on? What is your secret, right? I've never heard that comment from anyone. Like, no one ever said our data is 100% accurate. And so the fact of the reality is that, wanting or not, you are paying for this, and you are, you are spending cycles on this already. Now, how do you actually quantify what this means for your organization? Can be in a few different ways. And most of our customers think about it on a few different levels. The first is, how much time are you and your team, curious about Dan and his team, how much time do you and your team actually spend on data fire drills? What we found is that this can be as little as 20 to 30% and as high as 70 to 80% of teams' times. And, if you're running a team of like 5 to 6 engineers, or even, 500 to 600 engineers, that's a lot of time, right? That can be way more than a full-time employee who's spending time just on data fire drills.
Right.
And that's a waste of time, right? The second thing is think about all the things that you could do if you were not doing this, right? Sort of new features that you could be releasing, new sort of reports for your customers, internal and external, et cetera. And then I think, the third way just that folks thinks about this is what is the implication of a bad or decision that's been based on bad data, right? So for some organizations, for example, an example comes to mind. I'm talking to a data team that sort of a marketplace, and data drives their pricing algorithm. And so you can imagine that if there's wrong data feeding their pricing algorithm, they might be overcharging or undercharging. And They actually notice that they literally lose, tens of millions of dollars because of bad data feeding their pricing algorithm. So seeing actually how you use data, in what way, really, really impacts the answer to this. And I think, again, I'll just go back to even if we don't know exactly how for your particular organization, rest assured that it is quite expensive, the impact of data downtime, far less than we actually give credit to it, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And this is a fantastic answer. And thanks for that, Burr. Obviously, before I pick another question from Michael, I just wanted to remind our audience that we are giving away 10 swag from Monte Carlo. And what you just need to do is type hashtag Monte Carlo in the chat, so we can keep the ball rolling. And by end of this show, we'll be announcing 3 winners and keep it rolling. So yeah, Michael's question is here. Michael is asking, how is data used to deal with issues of burnout in the workplace? Interesting.
Oh, wow. That's a fantastic question. Well, honestly, I'd love to learn more from Michael on how, what is sort of behind these questions and get more detail. So maybe we can take that offline. But, I think sort of on the issue of burnout, some of the things that I've sort of seen folks actually try to use data to deal with actually starts with kind of any other problem that you would deal with, which is start measuring. Right? If you don't instrument and measure, then you actually don't have data, right? Right? If you're not figuring out, if you're not tracking and measuring, how are you ever going to improve on something? And so perhaps the very first step, again, we probably have to learn more a little bit Michael's case, but perhaps the first step is to have to figure out, how do I measure burnout in the workplace? And I think burnout is a topic that has become way more sort of top of mind for folks in the last year, especially with the pandemic. Even more than a year. And so it's top of mind for lots of folks. And so what measures can you put in place to figure out how are we doing on burnout, right? What is an acceptable or non-acceptable rate, and where do we want to be, right? And that can be, employee NPS, right? Yeah. So asking folks like, how happy, folks know NPS, Net Promoter Score, sort of score from 0 to 10. And you can measure folks' happiness or burnout in the workplace and see how you want to improve on that on a weekly or monthly or quarterly basis, right? So I think you can get very data driven with some of these issues around kind of team management, burnout being one example of them. From measuring different indicators of that. But happy to take that offline and help brainstorm more ways. Employee NPS is just one example.
Yeah, I think it's one of the topics which is very hot today, and there's a lot to talk about. And obviously, this burnout might be different from what we are thinking. But nice question, Michael. And there was obviously a fantastic comment from Dr. Angel. Well, Monte Carlo sounds to me like a Fitbit for data engineers. That's so true.
That's amazing. I mean, that's such a great analogy. Keeps you fit, keeps you walking, right? Keeps you running. For sure, I love that. I mean, it's sort of interesting, right, to think about kind of how we think about the health of data or the health more broadly. It's a very, very meta metaphor here, because we sort of we actually use Monte Carlo internally to check ourselves. Mm-hmm. So you would probably want Monte Carlo for the Fitbit. You need a Fitbit for the Fitbit for data engineers to make sure that the data is trusted. So,
yeah, exactly. Sounds good. Nice one, Dr. Angel. So there was a very interesting question from Edinka. What is the biggest data problem you have ever dealt with in your career, and how did you solve the problem? Interesting.
Yeah, that's a super interesting question. I think there's definitely like various sort of data problems, and those have also like changed throughout the years, right? So the type of problems that we were dealing with, 7 and 10 years ago are not the same problems that we're thinking about now, in terms of scalability and reliability of the architectures that we're using, and also its applications, right, for the data. I know this might be a cop-out answer, but honestly, the biggest data problem that I ever dealt with was helping our organization trust our data. For us, I'll sort of share a little bit more about this story, but this was sort of, I think this was back in 2016 as well as 2017. I was at Gainsight, and as a company, we were trying to become a lot more data driven. And, back then, it wasn't as well understood how to do that. We've come a really long way in the last few years. And, I remember as an organization, we were like, okay, let's get a lot more data driven. Let's actually use data to drive our decisions around customer success. So I'll just give you an example. Try to identify which customers are at risk of churn, right? What are some of the leading indicators that we can identify? So what are some of the things that we have data about for customers that we can track? So, for example, the number of support tickets. Is a lot of support tickets, is that a good sign or a bad sign? 0 support tickets. You would think that having 0 support tickets is actually great, right? Because it means that they don't have any problems. In fact, we actually found that having 0 support tickets is as bad as having a ton of support tickets, because it basically means that they're disengaged, the customer, right? So there's a lot of different ways that you can look at data, right? You can look at product adoption data. Are they actually using your product? How are they using your product? How many support tickets they filed? How do they engage with your blogs and content, right? There's a lot of different data that you can use to identify churn and drive expansion as well with your base. And so we were trying to get better at that and also help our customers get better at that. And the problem was that every single morning I would wake up and someone would be like, hey, something's wrong with the data. Hey, something's wrong with the data. And so we couldn't build anything. We were just playing this like whack-a-mole game, like, oh, let's fix this report. Oh, let's fix this pipeline. Oh, this job got, like, all these things that we had to fix. It's like, we don't even have time to actually work on what our customers need. We're just trying to figure out whether we can use our data or not, which is crazy. And I knew that if we couldn't trust our data, we couldn't let our customers trust our data. So I remember our CEO would email me saying, what's going on? And so, we actually me and my team got into a room and sort of like brainstormed and whiteboarded what we want the solution is. And then we sort of like hacked it together, come up with this like solution for now, kind of like a Band-Aid. And I was like, why is there no easier way to do this? Like, am I crazy? Is the world crazy? Like, are you like, who's crazy here? Right? Like, what is going on? Why do I need to like go in and like hack this random solution to a problem that's like very important? And I actually think will become more important. And so we hacked together a solution and then we helped our customers actually implement it. And it actually helped us. And I remember thinking like, why doesn't this exist? And so that is probably the biggest sort of problem, the biggest data problem that I've ever dealt with. And the way that I solved the problem was by starting Monte Carlo. I was like, I cannot imagine a world where we don't have something like this. And I've experienced this so deeply. And I know my colleagues and folks sort of in the data space feel the same thing. There has to be a solution to this. And, I just stopped sleeping at night because I was like, we have to solve this. We have to solve this. And just having that conviction, sort of gave me the confidence that I think we can solve this, and I think we should. And so there's something really sort of fun about kind of the founder sort of entrepreneurial path of being able. I feel very fortunate that I'm able to work on a problem that I personally experienced and that I'm very, very passionate about. And I'm like, we have to solve this, right? We just have to. Not just for us, but for the industry. We need to help people make sure that they can use their data. Otherwise, what are we doing here, right? It's like everything else is just moot, right? If we can't actually use our data.
Oh yes, definitely. I know one person that in data, and he's David Knickerbocker. He always tells me that if I can't save a life through data science, I'm not doing it. And that's such a great thought, right?
Yeah, we should have our bar. Yeah, the bar should be really high.
Definitely. So before I take another question from David, and he has asked a very difficult question, I must say, about which public figure do you admire the most? So before coming to that, obviously, I have a question, about the data teams, since you were talking about that. So what would be your advice to the data teams moving to decentralized data structures like data mesh? So how would you talk about it?
Yeah, so the concept of data mesh is very hot, and Jamak Dubani, who coined the term data mesh and sort of thought leader who talks a lot about that. We were on a podcast last week, and so encourage folks to check it out. She articulates very clearly how she thinks about this concept. I'm a big fan of that in her work. I think the way that I sort of see data mesh is, honestly, I actually see this kind of from the perspective of our customers, where if I get on a call with a customer, I actually talked to VP R&D just a few weeks ago, sort of a large ad tech company, who told me, I've been in data for the last decade and I've been looking for something to help me conceptualize how do I build my data organization, how to build a data-driven company. And I've been looking for this for years. And then suddenly I read this data mesh article and boom, it clicked. Like, I get it. And I finally understand how I want to build the team and how I want to build the company around it and what I need to do.
Wow.
And so I think for folks who have been in sort of software engineering, have seen sort of the move from monolithic to microservice architecture, they get that change. And now they see sort of how the concept of data mesh is applying that to data. So moving from sort of the centralized to decentralized, or kind of best of both worlds, if you will. And it just clicks with people. And actually the idea is quite simple, right? which is why I think it's brilliant. I think the thing that's sort of hardest for people in their sort of journey to data mesh or journey in this transformation is a few things. One, it's early days, so not many folks have made that transition. And the second, it's a really hard people problem. It's actually less of a data problem, I think, than a people problem. I think a lot of sort of the problems that data mesh solves are actually people problems. So problems like, for example, in sort of the prior world before data mesh, there might be a centralized team that has, that's responsible for everything around data. And whatever you need a report, you need to add a data source, you need to make a change, it has to go through them. And so this team basically have this like backlog of like maybe a couple of years of things, and like see you later if you like actually have something you need to get done, right? Not happening, not in 2021. And so centralized teams get really, really bombarded with requests and actually are unable to move fast, and the organization just gets stuck in that situation. Another common problem that happens is that there's sort of this kind of finger pointing blame game where the data consumers, data scientists or data analysts will blame sort of data engineering for problems, and data engineering will blame software engineering. And there's this like whole like ownership question of like who's actually responsible for getting the data and on time and all that stuff.
Right.
And the concept that data mesh sort of introduces is one where you have a centralized team that's responsible for sort of a platform, but there's also domain specific ownership on specific. Yeah, exactly. And so that allows teams to move fast and to build things that are particular for that domain. For example, just for finance or just for marketing, and to sort of identify the data that you need and build the pipelines for that and build the reports and the models for it. And yes, there are best practices and standards that are developed at the centralized team, but each domain specific team has the autonomy that they need, and it's more of a self-serve model, if you will. And that is a model that I see teams across the industry move to. And really the biggest change there is how do you get folks to sort of embrace this new model of working? But I'm seeing more and more very strong results of this working, especially around the idea of self-serve. And how do you actually make the data accessible to these domain-specific teams and allow them to move faster? So I think it's a very cool idea that speaks to many people who have been struggling for a long time, figuring out how do we actually like build strong data organizations.
Yeah, definitely. And also, Burr, how do you actually, obviously I want to take David's question, we are not missing on that, but just one question from my end. So how do you think these modern data teams get started with their building the data platforms? Obviously having that ownership is definitely one thing, but still, is there some way is there a route that they need to pick and they can build the teams?
Yeah, so we're actually writing a blog post about this, which I think is going to be released later today or tomorrow, hopefully, which actually like lays out kind of the steps to building a data platform. So your question is spot on. I won't steal the thunder too much from the blog, but yes, I do think that there are sort of what you'd call the modern data stack today, and sort of specific kind of things that you'd want to think through, like how to actually build the platform. And so I definitely encourage to like check that out and think through what are the different components that you need. I think the second thing to think through is like, how do you actually, we talked a little bit about data mesh, but how do you actually sort of organize ownership across the team? So who owns things like data quality, who owns things like observability, who owns things like access, who owns things like governance and security. Those things are typically not defined at the onset. And then maybe the most important thing, I should have mentioned this earlier, the most important thing is like define what is the goal of your data team or data organization, right? What is it for? What is it living for? You mentioned before, if you can't save a life, then you shouldn't be doing it. So how is your data organization saving a life today?
Exactly.
What kind of impact does it have? Because really, I think that's what we're here for. We're here to make an impact, right?
Yeah, definitely. So that is very important. I'm just searching there's a lot of questions obviously for you, Bud, but I'm just searching the question from David because I don't want to miss that. That's in that was obviously about someone whom you like in the data field, and I don't want to miss out on the exact questions. Okay, fine. I'll just pick that question afterwards. But to move forward, obviously, I wanted to know about the customer success because it's one of the most critical thing for all the companies. But particularly when you are in data industry, how
Yeah.
can these startups adopt a customer centric approach to building their companies? Like obviously, when you mentioned about uh, that you actually went on to the company data and you checked if there are queries coming, if there are too many, or if it's zero. Is zero actually good or bad? For me, I would say, oh wow, there are no queries from this one, but you had a different perspective and you found out, wow, because there's a gap between the company and the customer then, because there's no engagement from them. So what about this? How do you look at it?
Yeah, it's such a great question. I think a lot of sort of the traditional ways in which we've built companies is to start with some fancy technology, or something that's very self-centered, meaning something that's like solving kind of something that only we've experienced.
Exactly.
And that's kind of sort of human nature to do that. But I think if you want to build a product and a company that has real impact on customers, you have to start with the customers.
Oh yes.
And having this inward view is probably leading you down a route that might not be as impactful, right? And so I think I really believe in kind of customer-led growth and customer-led company building. I think that's super important. And actually, kind of from my experience at Gainsight, sort of helping organizations building customer success teams, there's nothing that's more important than having a strong customer obsession throughout your organization. And so I think, for us, we went even back to the days when we just started the company. The first thing was like, let's solve a customer problem. It wasn't let's build a really fancy model. It was like, let's find someone who has a strong pain and help save their lives, help
Exactly,
make a
got
difference
it.
for them.
I got
Right?
it. Yeah, I think problem solving is definitely something that every organization, if they kind of start looking from that perspective from starting, it definitely gives them a better overview to build the structure in a way where it will help a lot of companies then and the teams as well. So it really does make sense.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think, that branches out to everything that you're doing, right? How you design your product, how your, sales organization works, how your data organization works, right? Like what data products do you build? We as a data team, we can build so many different things. What do we actually build? Well, I'd say go talk to your customers. Ask what they care about. Ask what's keeping them up at night. Why are they awake at 3 a.m. doing things?
Oh,
What is that thing? Go
yeah.
solve that problem, right? And then address that. And so being customer first in your mindset, honestly, I don't think there's anything that could be more important than that.
Okay, yes, fantastic. I totally agree, and thanks for that, Bud. I've found David's question, and here it is. So, which public figure do you admire the most besides Bruce Willis? A data public figure, I mean. So, yeah.
Yeah, great question. And love the hint about Bruce Willis. There's certainly, a number of different figures that I think very highly of in the data space. There's a lot of innovation going on, a lot of sort of different things that are happening. Perhaps one sort of person that comes to mind is DJ Patil. So he was, the former chief data scientist in the United States, and doing a lot of important work there to actually bring data to the forefront. And most recently, he's been doing a lot of work actually related to using data to combat COVID-19. Yeah, and I, am really, I think talking about saving lives, right? Is there a better example?
Nothing like it. And I trust me, I'm one of his biggest fans as well, because I really admire the work that he does. He is very straight, about he puts data first, and his thoughts are fantastic, and he's one of those that have the similar thoughts that say that I'm saving life with data, so which is fantastic. Nice one, Bert. And there was a question from Dr. Angel. What are the hybrid organizational configurations and roles emerging which are data enabled and customer centric? I'm particularly interested on the non-tech side of enterprises. how businesses are aligning tech plus data plus people. Interesting.
Oh man, I mean, we could probably spend a full hour just unpacking what's in this. I think you just asked the holy grail, Dr. Angel. This is like, how do we do it? I think it's a really good question, and the answer probably lies actually in that question. You have to think through tech, data, and people very separately. Lots of people start with the culture piece, to your point, kind of on the non-tech side of thing, which starts with figuring out what is the culture that we want to set, and how do we actually become data driven, and what does that mean, right? So when you sort of enable people with data, what do they do with it? So actually, we had a great presentation with one of our customers, Colibri Games, a few weeks ago. We can send the link to this too, about how they shared their move to the data mesh, actually. So they walk through their journey. I highly recommend sort of viewing that. We can share the resource. One of the things that they are looking at is what percentage of their decisions as a company are actually based on data. Yeah. That's a really bold decision to make at the cultural level, to say, we need to measure how many decisions are data driven. That's like, in today's world, like so few people do that. That's so forward thinking, and I love it, right? That's so powerful to be able to say more than 90% of our decision making is happening with data, right? Yeah. And so figuring out like what's our culture around that, and the same with being customer centric, right? I think that's like, how do we measure that, and what does that actually mean, right? So what percentage of our roadmap, of our product roadmap, is based on customer requests versus innovation that's separate from that? What percentage of time do we spend on customer problems versus other problems that are just internal to us? It's a very bold cultural decision to say we are customer first. And I'll give you an example. At Monte Carlo, engineering and product is measured based on our customer success. Like, making customers happy is the number one goal. There isn't some other hidden goal that they're measured about. That's what they're driving forward to. And that, I think, is also, not very traditional for an engineering and product organization to be goaled after. But I think in a company that says that they're customer success, we better do what we say, right? And so again, like there's a lot that goes into that, but start thinking about what does that look like, right? Kind of on the culture and measurement side. I think that those are probably good starting points, and then from there, kind of all the details of like what are the different functions have to do in order to sort of align around that.
Yeah, definitely. Amazing question, Dr. Angel. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, yes, you can talk for an hour on this, because obviously, what I feel is talking about customer and being customer centric for an organization is the most important. And Monte Carlo has obviously identified their customers very well early in the stage, because you definitely focus more on customers and their problems, so which is fantastic. Also, do you have any call to action before we wrap up and announce the winners?
Well, I can't wait to hear the winners, but yeah, I mean, I'll just say thank you to everyone, and you're welcome to check out our blogs and read resources, and reach out if you have any thoughts about data downtime or data observability. Would love to hear from folks online.
Oh, yes, fantastic. So let's announce the three winners. I will quickly give them a quick run of your website too after we announce the winners. All right, let's do it. All the best, everyone. I'm excited. Yeah. So we have 26 entries. We are drawing for the first one, and here we go. It's typically a great way by StreamYard. A very thank you to StreamYard for organizing such stuff where we can collect names through hashtags. Hey, Neha, congratulations. So Neha is our first winner. She gets swag from Monte Carlo. So amazing. Second winner is Dr. Angel. You're lucky one, and amazing questions. So thanks for that.
Awesome. Yeah. +1 on that.
Yeah. the last winner for today. But what we'll be doing is obviously me and Molly will be going through all the questions, all the hashtags, and we'll be choosing 7 more winners. So keep an eye on that. Sashank, you're the 3rd winner. Congratulations.
Congrats.
Yes, fantastic. So I was just I just wanted to let the audience know quickly about Monte Carlo. I just wanted to give them a quick show. So this is the website. Yeah. So where are the blogs, Bert?
Oh, if you go to the top,
Yeah.
and it says
you have it
blog.
here.
Yep,
Okay,
exactly. Perfect.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, this is amazing.
Yeah, so there's lots. This is an example of a resource to how to build a data platform, and there's lots more resources around, ways to make data engineers love working for you, more culture pieces. This story about AutoTrader, how they migrated to decentralized model. It is fantastic.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna check this out definitely after our show, because this is like a gold mine. I was just wondering where I was wondering you guys have a Medium blog, but it's on the website itself, so which is fantastic. All right. Before we wrap up, and it was fantastic talking to you, Barb. Thanks for visiting the Ravit Show. You are one of the best people in data that I know, and I always say people to follow you because there's so much to learn. But obviously, if people wish to reach out to you, which is the best place, and how can they reach out?
Yeah, they're welcome to reach out. You can email me directly, bar@montecarlodata.com, or reach me on LinkedIn or Twitter. Yeah, and thanks for the kind words. I'm a big fan of your show, and it was such a pleasure being here today. And thanks to everyone for the fantastic questions. Such good questions.
Thank you everyone for joining in, and thank you, Burr, once again. You were fantastic, and see you again on the Ravit Show, maybe a 2.0 version soon.
Absolutely. Hope to